Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Emily Mooney, and I'm the project lead of the Community Knowledge Program at Wellesley Institute. Before we begin, we wish to acknowledge this land on which Wellesley Institute operates. For thousands of years, this land has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. The Community Knowledge Program aims to encourage collaborative research and knowledge sharing within the immigrant and refugee serving sector in the Greater Toronto Area. We work to fill existing gaps in how researchers, policymakers, and community agencies collaborate to conduct research and apply its findings to frontline work with newcomers. In 2021, we conducted a needs assessment to identify and understand these gaps. One way that we're addressing them is through these panel discussions to convene leaders from different parts of the sector to speak about their experiences and perspectives on research and knowledge mobilization. Since the Community Knowledge Program came to Wellesley Institute, we've held panel discussions on a variety of topics, including misinformation in newcomer communities, how immigration status can affect health, and how to build and sustain research partnerships successfully. These recordings are available on our YouTube channel and the Community Knowledge Program website. Today's panelists will talk about some innovative ways to mobilize research knowledge and make sure it finds its way into settlement practice. They all have different experiences, perspectives, and approaches to research and to their work with newcomers and to how they share information effectively. I'm really excited to hear what everyone has to say. Before we get to the speakers, I wanted to go through a few housekeeping notes. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and that the video and transcript will be available on our website later this month. If you require subtitles, you can enable live transcription by clicking Live Transcript at the bottom of your screen and clicking Show Subtitle. Please note that the chat function is disabled for this event, but you will be able to use the Q&A function, which we encourage you to do, to share your questions with me and with the panelists so that we can get you involved in the discussion. As soon as we finish the discussion, a short survey will appear on your screen in your browser. We would very much appreciate it if you could stay with us until the end to share your feedback, as we'll use it to improve our future programming. We're going to start with our panelists' presentations, and then we'll come back together for questions afterwards. We have three distinguished panelists joining us today. First, we'll hear from Marco Campana. Over the past 30 years, Marco has worked in the newcomer serving sector in communications and digital services, from serving clients directly to acting as the first content coordinator on ocasiesettlement.org. He created and managed the Settlement at Work site, launching Ocasie's Learn at Work, online learning site for workers in the sectors. And he has participated in a number of efforts to enhance knowledge mobilization as well. He led digital and social media strategy work at Maytree and currently works as a freelance consultant, helping agencies harness technology in delivering client services. His current focus is on digital transformation, digital inclusion, and equity, demystifying technology in social services and social change, and immigration, diversity, and inclusion in Toronto. Our second speaker will be Hajia Abubakar. Hajia is an active member of the Regent Park community. Originally from Ghana, she immigrated to Canada in 1988. Ever since she's moved to Canada, Hajia has lived in Regent Park. She worked as a Regent Park ambassador for the Invisible Wounds Project, sponsored by the Center for Research and Innovation for Black Homicide Victims, CRIB. As the co-chair of the Regent Park Safety Network and an animator, she helps create workshops for members of the community. She's also a wraparound support worker at the Toronto Centre of Learning and Development, TCCLD, helping to provide many different workshops for programs provided by TCCLD to help make the community stronger. And then finally, we will hear from Marina Morgenstern. Marina is a social work researcher, educator, and practitioner, and an associate professor at Trent University, Durham. Her social work practice experience ranges from individual and family-oriented practice to community and program development. Marina's practice in different countries has attuned her to social inequalities at local, national, and global levels. Her areas of teaching and research interest include social constructivist, feminist, intersectional, anti-oppressive, and anti-racist approaches to social work with immigrant and ethnic minority individuals, families, and groups, and the inclusion of marginalized voices into social work theory, research, and practice. Very much looking forward to the discussion today, and let's get started with Marco Campana.
Thanks very much, Emily. As I share my screen, I'm going to do something a little bit different today. Instead of a presentation, I've written up an article on my site that I'll be able to share with you after, because I want to meander through a number of different links as I go. So this is on the site now. It's km4s.ca, as you see at the top, and we can share it out later either through the chat or through the notes from the presentation. And so Emily provided some really good questions, and I just kind of want to meander through them and take you through different links and places where I think knowledge mobilization is happening or can be happening more in our sector. So how am I sharing research information with the community? And my community is the service provider community. So I work with service providers, academics, others who have served newcomers formally and informally. And I use this site, the Knowledge Mobilization for site, as my main kind of vehicle to do that. And so on the homepage, you'll see it's organized into three main sort of sections. So I do blog posts, publications, and what I call good ideas in settlement and inclusion. And the idea behind that is to share information, create a centralized site where you can find relevant research, interesting and promising ideas, as well as sort of blog posts that are a combination of webinar recordings, interesting meeting summaries, discussions, or ideas that I might be sharing. And so over the last 3.5 years, I've been sharing a fair bit. So I've got 23 good ideas, 350 blog posts actually as of today because of this new one, and 264 publications. And I'm barely scratching the surface of what's out there in our sector in many ways. And my focus, because of my own background, I've worked in settlement and digital transformation for about 20 years, but I also worked as an employment consultant or counselor early in my career. So I focus a lot on digital transformation resources as well as employment-focused resources, and that's a lot of what you'll sort of find there. I also have a podcast called Technology and Human Services, where I interview people doing interesting work at the intersection of social services and technology. And so my goal there is to really kind of allow people to do a deep dive into the work that they're doing and to share it without necessarily feeling formal about it, because it's hard sometimes to ask somebody to write a summary of what they're working on because they want it to be perfect. But if you just have a conversation with them, then it feels a lot easier, and people can talk off the top of their heads on a lot of things. And so I was realizing I was having a lot of interesting conversations with people, so why not start sharing them? I also have a weekly newsletter that I try to, again, kind of curate useful information related to what I'm posting on my site, but also what I see happening in the sector that I might not be posting fully on, but where I may share on LinkedIn, where I tend to overshare information. LinkedIn is kind of, if you want to connect or follow me on LinkedIn, that's where I just kind of share stuff and reshare other people's really interesting information and what's out there. And sometimes it makes its way onto my site, but a lot of times it might just be a quick in the moment share. I also have a little networking group that I run where we meet monthly to talk about technology use in the sector. And again, it's an email discussion list. So in between meetings, we have conversations about how we're using technology, and then we meet once a month to dive into a deep topic, for example. And so it's a very small group because I'm looking for people who are not just interested in tech, but who are actively working in technology, who are creating some of these good ideas or promising practices. And I chose this approach because for a number of reasons. One is I believe and I subscribe to the idea that information wants to be free, and too much information in many sectors, ours included, is hard to find, right? It's kind of like the newcomer system navigation problem, the research and publication and good idea navigation problem. There are a lot of different places where things are out there. So for example, we have a number of sector communities of practice and professional development spaces. And so these here are just a number of the ones. You may be even unaware of some of them, you may be a member of some of them, but we have a national community of practice called SettleNet. We have a national newcomer navigation network that's focused on helping newcomers occurs in the health sector, but also bleeds into general settlement topics. Many organizations have their own network. So, for example, AMSA, which is the provincial umbrella organization in BC, has a weekly discussion group where you can get information. CAMH has a really interesting immigrant and refugee mental health project. Most people look at it as a toolkit and as a place to get training, but they also have a community of practice. And there are, Tutela and Avenue.ca. If you're in the language side of the sector, you know that these are the communities of practice. And then the list kind of goes on, and they're topic specific and network specific, and kind of meander through. And so there's a lot of interesting stuff that's in a lot of interesting places, but it's not always easy to find. And I'm very much subscribed to the idea of, if information has been publicly funded, it should be publicly available. And that's not a new idea, but it can be a bit of a touchy issue in our sector and amongst academics as well, where they're trying to publish into peer-reviewed journals that might not be accessible to us in the sector. And so the idea of knowledge mobilization for me is to really answer the questions: what, so what, and now what. So what happened? Why is it important? Who is it important to? And now what can we do with this information? So the idea of sharing widely, as I mentioned, is not new. So in the UK, we have Creative Commons copyright, there's Crown copyright, there's and in educational section, open educational resources, which is what Tutela and Avenue were created to do. You can go to those sites and you can find SCORM packages and H5P modules that you can integrate into your learning management system, so you don't have to recreate a module for ESL classes and things like that. And in the UK, they created something called the Open Working Toolkit, which really, at its simplest intention, is to encourage you to just start sharing, to be intentional about how you're sharing, that it's also about relationships, and that you're not building alone, but you're building on the shoulders of others. So there's a really great toolkit and manifesto that I've linked to in this article, where you can walk through to understand what exactly this looks like and how you could incorporate it into the work that you're doing. So it's open by default, as it should be, and it walks you through. So we have really good models about how we should be doing this. So what's working in terms of my approach to knowledge mobilization, trying to put all of this information out into the public? What's not working is that it's sort of something I do on the side of my desk. So while I mentioned I have over 200 publications, I've got another 300 sitting on my hard drive, and it just grows every single day, right? We're pumping out a lot of research, but also community information that we're trying to capture. And so there's actually a ton of information that is still not fully accessible. It's also distributed amongst a number of different sites. So there are, like those communities of practice, many websites where people are posting information. A lot of it is organizationally specific. And so I found about 28 of those, and I created what you can do is with Google is you can create custom searches that search only those websites. So on my site, you can actually go and you can search what York University is doing, what's happening at University of Manitoba, what's happening at IRCC, at UBC, at Statistics Canada, at all of the provincial umbrella organizations, at Toronto Metropolitan University. And the idea here is, because again, my focus on the site is mostly on digital as well as employment, because those are my areas of knowledge and expertise and interest, but also just because of the realities of scale. So if I don't have it, you might find it here. So you can come to this site, for example, and you can do a search for Afghan youth, and you can see, I've got a little bit of stuff, but AMSA has some stuff. There's some stuff on the Settlement at Work website. The OECD has some stuff, a number of different places. And you can, just like a Google search, you can keep sort of sifting through and seeing what's out there related to these topics. So I may not have it on my site, but you can still access it through the various sites that you might not even know exist, but where there are active public repositories of research and information. Again, a lot of it is network or institutionally specific, but super useful for us in our work. And at least it gives you access to what's out there in the public domain in many cases. So what I'd love to be able to do, so there's a really interesting model around knowledge mobilization called Seek, Sense, and Share. And what I find is I'm able to, with the resources I have, to do the seeking and the sharing part, but the sense making is so important, and that's where I'm not able to do as much work, and I would love to be able to do more. And what that really means is answering questions like, how relevant is this to you as a frontline worker or a manager or an ED? How can you use this in your work? So York University's Knowledge Mobilization Department created something called Research Snapshots, where they for a time, use this to take any piece of research coming out of their networks and create essentially a 2 or 3 pager that answered these key questions. What is this research about? What do you need to know? What did they do? What did they find, and how you can use this research? And this is an example from one of the networks at York University, building I think it's building resilient municipalities. So they talk about what the research is about, what you need to know, what did they do, what did they find, and how can you use this research? And that's almost the most important one. And what I would love to be able to do, and what I think we need in our sector, is a knowledge mobilization approach that says, here's a 150-page report. Section, pages 10 to 40 are what frontline workers should read. Sections 10 or pages 10 to 57, managers need to read this, and all of you need to read the recommendations at the end. This is for policymakers. This is for academics. This section talks about more research that needs to be done. All of those kinds of things. So we can lead people through the materials so that they know where to start, right? The other thing about knowledge mobilization is it's far too focused as a practice on academic to impact or community focused. And I think there's also a community to community aspect of knowledge mobilization that is really important for our sector. So the idea of what we call promising practices or good ideas. So Pathway to Prosperity has a program called Sharing Settlement and Integration Practices that Work, and a website that you can go to and you can scroll through. You can watch video descriptions that have been made with the people who are running the projects. You can download a brief, and each brief has a program overview, key features, any performance measurement or evaluation that's been done, and links to more information. And it's useful, but it's still a very formal academic approach where people have to apply and go through a vetting process. And I think there's just as much value in us simply starting to share, right? Going back up to that start sharing open working toolkit, the work that we're doing. And so, for example, Cities of Migration for me was a really good example of that. The site doesn't exist anymore, but in its heyday of about 10 years, they created 325 good idea profiles. So profiles of interesting projects that were happening in cities. It was about inclusion in cities in predominantly Europe, North America, and Australasia. But the idea was, there might be something happening in New York that might be of interest to you in Copenhagen, and vice versa. And if you don't even ever hear about it because people are waiting to the end to give you their formal evaluation, you may even, in fact, not be able to connect with the people who ran the project because the project is over, it lost its funding or whatever. But the idea was, these are good ideas that are emerging, that are thoughtful. Some have even failed, but we can learn from them. They're works in progress. And so there's a ton of information that was captured in these things that I think we as a sector need to kind of think about how we can focus on similar kinds of collections, right? In massive repositories, 185 videos that they created, mainly made up of webinar recordings of people talking about their good ideas and things like that. So how is the work that I've been doing useful? How has the community responded to the approach that I've taken? One of the things is we lose things in our sector from time to time because projects end. So and I think that institutional memory is really important. So I've been able to rescue a couple of projects. So immigrantchildren.ca was a website that was created by an individual who just was interested in topics related to children and immigration. And between 2008 to 2021, before she ended the project and got rid of the site, she had 264 posts. So I've archived them all in a website that you can access. This is her website, right, with archives that go back and back and back. Because she did it in WordPress, it was easy for her to give it to me and import into WordPress. It doesn't take a lot of work, but this would have been lost in 2021 if we hadn't tried to find a way to archive it. Similarly, eSkills.ca was an IRCC service delivery improvement project that was funded and ended, and then their website went down. And what they did is created curriculum related to digital literacy and cybersecurity for newcomers. And you can access that curriculum if you're part of Avenue.ca as an ESL instructor and you're a member of that closed network. And if you know that it's there, but the materials are useful for settlement organizations, for newcomer serving organizations, you name it. And so we recreated the archive where you can actually download their entire curriculum into Moodle or into another, I think it's D2L. Moodle and D2L. So you can come here and you can grab the curriculum and use it. So it lives on outside of the password. The other thing, a great example is the Center for Excellence in Research and Immigration and Settlement, where Emily's project comes from now. it died. The website died, and all of their research died with it. There was a vast repository. This is Internet Archive. If you're not familiar with it, you can take a look back at a website at a point in time. So this is going back to September 12th, 2011, and you can see they had 83 working papers. They had what is it here? 42 policy matter documents. In one stroke, those things are gone. Now, I happen to have found a way to download them all, and they're all on my hard drive, but now I got to get them back up onto my website, which will take some time. But the reality is that was a great example of where a network ended, lost its funding, and our access to its information completely died. So have any changes come about because of this work? I have this laugh cry gif because this is kind of how I feel most of the time about knowledge mobilization. Is we want to do so much, but we're not able to get there. So in every consultation that we have talked about collaboration, technology, or innovation for literally the past 25 years, knowledge mobilization comes up as something that we want. At one point, IRCC was listening. This is from a presentation in 2021 where they wanted to continue to build the evidence base, identify and provide guidance, do sector capacity building. None of this has happened since they showed these very promising slides, but we have made recommendations, and I'll end quickly because I know my time is up, to show that the latest summary of all of these recommendations is in a report from last year where we're talking about high quality, inclusive, innovative settlement service delivery. And one of the sections was about mobilizing knowledge. And so we're talking about mobilizing knowledge between IRCC and those they fund. We're talking about it across the sector amongst service providers, like creating these kinds of knowledge hubs, as well as between the sector and other funders, and even including the private sector in what work is happening there and can be brought into it, right? So there's a lot of private sector research that happens related to immigration and settlement that is relevant for our work. And then how we can do better work between the sector and researchers themselves. So what I'm trying to do is really kind of a drop in the water, but I'm hoping it has ripple effects, and that at the very least, if you're looking for useful information about digital transformation or supporting newcomers' access to employment, this is a site that you can use and benefit from. So like I said, we'll share this link so that you can read through and click on all of these myriads of links to your heart's content after the session. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you so much, Marco. This has been a tremendous presentation about the amazing work that you've been doing and a lot of the issues that face knowledge mobilization when people in so many disparate parts of a really diverse sector are trying to bring their work together. I am very interested to dig some more into what you've been saying in the question and answer session, and you've given a really great perspective on some of the newer considerations about knowledge mobilization, and really appreciated that. Thank you very much. Next, we will hear from Hajia, and she will talk about her experiences with knowledge mobilization in Regent Park and her community. So we're getting a very grassroots approach, which I'm very excited to hear. Thank you, and Hajia, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Really glad to be here. So I'm going to start with the research that we did while ago with the community about affordability in affordability in housing in Regent Park community. The research was me and other two partners, and it was in the pandemic. So we really didn't have it was in the middle of the pandemic, so we didn't really have the mobility to have a focus group and do our research the way it's normally being done. And actually, that was good. That was good because we didn't have we didn't have the mobility to go ahead to reach people in the, like a other community with the similar problems. So being in the doing online is actually better because we had a lot more people responding which is the which is the difficult part when you're doing research, having people to actually respond to your research, because after we talk to them on the phone, everything has to be online. After we talk to them on the phone, we have to send them Google survey for them to do the survey and send it to us. And even though we have a lot, like I did not like that approach. And also the research we did with the invisible wounds, that one also we had to do it mostly online, even though I know a lot of people that I have in my focus group. So like Marco is saying, like I find when you're doing research, being like in a kind of white coat area, like doesn't really work. You have to be with the people. So most of our research now, we just go to other group of people, other of my friends who have their own group of like women's health and all, and other group of social group that do. So we go to them and we ask them, okay, this is what we're doing. We need your group to give us feedback, how to do this, how we can change it, what's working, what's not working. And we take the survey right there. We don't send them survey, because if you send them survey, you never get anything. So we have our survey, we take it right there. And from there, we move to the next step. And so that's how we like being, how do I say this? Being approached, and also people are able to approach you, and being be part of the people, be part of the group, and then they're comfortable enough to give you feedback, to give you honest feedback if they want you or not. Like when I did the homicide research with the Regent Park community, some of these people actually, well, we've been through it together. So like Regent Park, we had one of top three homicide area. So some of them, I mean, we've been there when the shooting happened, whatever, we're there together. But when it comes to something like asking them to go back, to listen, to go back, it's really hard. You have to it's really hard to have them open up. So like being empathetic and knowing that this is what they've been through, knowing that this is how, I mean, them, you've been there with them. So like it helps them open up, and that's how we get the proper, honest information than sending and asking. And also we don't ask them, okay, we don't ask them, here is the site, go look for it. It will never happen. They come to you, you go to the site with them, you pull out the information that you want, and you literally guide them. And if anything that they need, you literally call them. You don't just give it. If you give them, okay, here is it, go in, like you never, like they're never gonna do it. So you have to be there with them. Come to the center. I'm here. Somebody else is here, and we guide them through what they need to do. But what I like, the approach that we are choosing is really like, I think almost one-to-one, one person at a time. You help you, they come, you listen to them, you give them what you can. If it's not working, they come back, you go with them. It's like, in our community, there's a lot of barriers. There is a language barrier. There is sometimes it's family, sometimes someone have, like, there is, sometimes I dare say sometimes that like in the family, somebody wants to do something, but there's somebody else in the family, because of them, they cannot do it, or maybe she wants to do something, but there is a husband behind the scene who because of that she can do. So because things has to be like, you really have to be there, like you have to become like, that's why Regent Park more, it's like we are like family sometimes, like, because we are there for each other. We are there for each other. It's like, if you need me, I'm here, kind of thing. So that's how it works in Regent Park. Like, yeah, that's how it works in the Regent Park. So and the response is amazing. The response we get from our community, we become, well, this response is, we become sisters in a way after the program. We become one, because I know you, you know me, and even our children are becoming one, because we see each other almost constantly. Like, we see each other at grocery store, which is at event. We see each other on the street. We see each other in schoolyard. So it's like almost everybody knows everybody knows everybody when it comes to how the community respond. Like, and I don't know how to say this. We become like people, we can depend on each other. We know each other. We can depend on each other. You call somebody because you want to ask them something, and it turns to conversation about them, about their family, about what happened yesterday at that other meeting, and so it has become like very, very easy in our community, and because we have that kind of relationship with each other. Whenever we have to come to do any research, any focus group, it's now like call this person, and she call this person, and she call the other person, and before we know it, like that, things is happening. So like, we are just we don't treat each other like, okay, we're doing research. We don't treat it, it's like a event. It's more like family event. You call this person, you call this person, and before we know it, whatever it is we're doing is going on, and it's amazing. That's it. Like, it's amazing. I mean, I did the two research, but when I take that path of, oh, I'm doing research, it never works for me. It never works for me. It just have to be the community thing that okay, we have this project, everybody come and let's do this project together. That's what works. But when I do it like research, it doesn't work for me. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Hajia. I think you've really spoken a lot about how the relationships in the community are absolutely central to getting information out there. And the work, I mean, we're talking here about innovative approaches to getting the knowledge out there. And I think that this is building, what you've been talking about is building on some very old things, like the sense of community, the sense of family, the sense of everybody knowing everybody else. But I think that, and I'd like you to talk about this a bit in the Q&A a bit later, about the immigrant women in integration program, and the training that your organization has done. You were talking about the participants become like sisters.
Yeah.
And I think that like, this is the first thing that made me interested in the work at TCCLD, was finding out about that program. And how hearing you speak so passionately about the the connections and the families and kind of the grapevine for getting information out, I think can be very effective. Okay, thank you. Thank you. And let's move on now to Marina, who will talk about her work at Trent Durham.
Hello, everyone. So I, unlike other speakers, do have a PowerPoint. After all, it's academics, right? So I'm going just to share my screen. Can you see it? Right, excellent. Wonderful. So I am going to talk today about a research project, about a photo voice research project. That is kind of an example of what Haija talked about, of this relational research that is based or very much informed by relationship and caring for each other. And so I'll talk a little bit about the project, and because it is impossible to talk about the knowledge mobilization of this project without understanding a little bit details about it. So this project looked actually at the experiences of looking for professional employment for skilled immigrants. It's a community-based project that was developed in consultations with Newcomer Advisory Table, that is part of the Durham Local Immigration Partnership. And so we met with the newcomers. They talked a lot about this dynamic that you all are pretty much aware of immigration expectations not meeting integration practice, where a lot of immigrants are accepted to Canada based on their professional and educational credentials, only to come to Canada and find out that these are not necessarily recognized. And so it was important that we put a spotlight on those experiences from the immigrants' point of view, to include their voice in the conversation about what's happening. And as we talked about it, it became clear that what was important was to put a spotlight, or to understand the stories from perspective that takes into consideration social structure and the role of immigrant social location in informing their experience, not necessarily the individualistic Western approach that puts a lot of emphasis on individual skills or individual talents or ability to achieve something. And because we wanted this immigrant voice, we decided on the methodology of photo voice. And in a minute, I will talk a little bit more in depth about it. So the photo voice methodology essentially is about, so we had a group of 10 immigrants who live in Durham. And in summer 2021, we gave them digital cameras, and we asked them to take photographs that represented their experiences of employment search. Or essentially, we asked them, please take photographs of the opportunities, challenges, and solutions in your employment search. And they've taken those pictures. They reflected on them. We also met with each one of them to understand those photographs and experiences more in depth. And we finally had several meetings with older group where each one of them shared their photographs with others, and also developed calls for action that they would like to have come out of this project. So why photo voice? I have a friend who was born in Nigeria and who is now a professor at Toronto Metropolitan University, Dr. Funke Oba. And she once taught me a Nigerian proverb that says, until the animals get their own storyteller, the hunter is the hero of all stories. The point here is that hunters share stories of their achievements and bravery, and these stories earn them a lot of glory and praise. And similarly, Canada is known in the global community as a global leader of immigrant integration. But the voice of immigrants and their experiences are not necessarily heard. And so we wanted to highlight those stories told by immigrants about their employment search journeys and opportunities and challenges that they experienced. And so we used photo voice intentionally to facilitate the inclusion of marginalized voices in this dialogue. We wanted to record and reflect the community's strengths and concerns, not only challenges and faults. We wanted to discuss the issues of the importance to the immigrants and promote this critical dialogue. And by this project, we wanted to reach service providers and policymakers. So this methodology is not new. It's been used a lot recently. But what appeals to me about it, it's evocative nature, because that's what allows us to create this human connection. So in one other project, the participants, when they talked about it, they said, we gift you our lens. So for a moment, you can experience our reality. And that's exactly what we wanted to achieve with this project. And so based on the methodology and based on those conversations, the purposes of the project became not only the exploration or description of the experiences, but also engagement in this critical dialogue regarding immigrants' experiences and engagement in social advocacy. And as we worked, by the way, I didn't say this, but the photographs that you see here, they are all part of the project. These are the photographs taken by the participants. So you can see here this lush greenery juxtaposed by red lights or red tape. So this picture was taken during the lockdown, during the border closures, but it for these participants, it represented this tension between the opportunities and the actual experiences, the lush green opportunities that are not that accessible. So this is another picture from the project where the participant here talked about her shoes, and shoes are associated with the skills that she has. And she says, well, I've got lots of different shoes and lots of different skills that I put to life, but my favorite shoes, my white shoes, remain unworn. This participant is a physiotherapist who's been trying to get her credentials recognized for almost 10 years now. And so she's been working in different jobs and trying different skills on the way there. And as you can see, there are her white shoes remain untouched, unworn. And so this photograph, I put it here because it pretty much symbolizes the stories the participants told us about the tensions between the existing opportunities and multiple barriers, the experiences of exclusion that they had, as well as the immense resilience and resistance that they practice as they deal with the challenges they have. Now, I mentioned also that we not only looked at their experiences, we also talked together about what action is required to come out of this project. And what you can see on this slide is actually some of the calls to action that the participants come up with. And so as we worked with this, it became very much clear that the project, the photographs, the stories that come out of it should be shared as wide as possible. Again, here is another photograph from the project that talks about this resiliency and resistance and adaptability, the ability to be on the ground and also swim and also be in the water. So how did we share it? Well, we still are talking COVID pandemic. And so if at the beginning we wanted to have an in-person exhibit, it became clear that we can't have that. And Marco, I wish I knew about you before, but so we came up with this idea of having a digital photo book, where we took all the photographs and the stories and we organized them in a photo book that's being stored digitally and also shared digitally with the members of the Durham Local Immigration Partnership, with the service providers in welcome centers and employment services around Durham, with local politicians. We also showcased this photo book in the Conversation Canada. The photo book can be found now, it's part of the Trent University Library digital collections, and it can be accessed there for free. You don't need a membership or you don't need to be affiliated with Trent University. That's open access. Marco, if you're interested, I would love to share it with you if you want to put it on your website. That actually will be the best use of it, I think. So the link is here. I will share it later. I'm just realizing that people can't access it while I'm sharing this screen. Another way we shared the photographs was also a public library. So COVID eventually ended, but it was very much important for us to also create this human connection. You know, Brian Stevenson, a well-known human rights activist, he says we are all implicated when other people get mistreated. And so we wanted to create this place where people could come together and learn about the challenges that immigrants face and the resistance, resilience practices. And for those photographs and stories to engage in this emotional space and to create this human connection, to engage in this humanity and understanding. And so we did, we started with Trent University with a home. And here you can see the picture of me and the research coordinator, who was Uzma Danish, who was very much influential for this project. You can see there is a YouTube interview of us providing an interview prior to the exhibit, a little bit about our intentions. watch the video, listen to it, do not read the subtitles, they're awful. I speak with accent, it doesn't pick it up at all. It creates a completely different story. So you can see here on the left some of the testimonials that we got from people who took part in the exhibit. So this exhibit became now a traveling exhibit. And after Trent, it moved to Pickering Welcome Center. We are working these days on bringing it to the Pickering Public Library. It will move to the region of Durham headquarters later on. And then in summer will be hosted by public libraries around Durham region. In Oshawa in June, Clarington in July, August, Whitby in September. And in October, we are taking it outside of Durham into York region to the Newmarket Welcome Center. If you're interested in bringing the exhibit to you, I will share my information and you can definitely contact me. Few thoughts, and I kind of mentioned them already, but just to summarize. So I hope you can see it well. I'm now realizing that I put here an image of a quote by Paulo Freire that cannot be forgotten in this kind of work. And he said that knowledge emerges only through invention and reinvention, through the restless, impatient, continuing, hopeful inquiry human beings pursue in the world, and with each other. And I think that this quote encapsulates in the best way possible what the opportunities provided by this project. The opportunity to put a spotlight on alternative worldview, on the worldview and experiences of immigrants from their point of view, to learn what matters to them, and also to provide through this legitimation and recognition of their stories, the validation of their stories, because all of us who work with immigrants, we have this symbolic power to validate what they have and to turn the cultural capitals, the education, the professional experience that they have into this symbolic power that helps everyone to continue moving forward. The evocative value that I mentioned before, the idea of building bridges and human connection, you could see the testimonials before of people talking about this opportunity for them to meet newcomers on even level, where systemic inequalities matter but don't matter, where there is no this social divisiveness, but we meet each other on a human level, and can find how when people can relate to the stories told. It creates momentum through reflexivity and action, and it creates definitely this brave space of belonging and critical consciousness. And Haji, you talked about doing research. You didn't call it research, but research can be also done through this relational approach. And when we do research like this, it creates this brave space where people start sharing what matters to them. As great as it is, there are still some challenges, and we dealt with some of them, and we're still thinking and reflecting on how to deal with others. And it's all work in progress. It's a snapshot. PhotoVoice provides a snapshot of experience, while experience always evolving. We are complex human beings, and sometimes this complexity may not come through. there is also this concern or of the salience of social expectations. You all know how much individualism and meritocracy are powerful in this society. And so when you talk to immigrants, you can hear them a lot talking or presenting their stories from that point of view. And it takes, Hija, again, I'm going to you, but it takes a lot of relational work to move away from those stories. It depends on me, I'm the master of my destiny, to hearing some other stories of challenges. Especially, you know, when, by the way, the research team that worked with research participants, we are all immigrants to one degree or another. We all speak with accents, we all can share this experience. And for participants in the beginning was quite hard to share some of the challenges because they talked to researchers who achieved something or were in a different social space than they were. And it took a lot of relational work and a lot of care and a lot of developing rapport and relationship to get to the stories that mattered to them, not what they thought mattered to us in the beginning as researchers. So we're here meeting different social expectations. And as we get to those stories of challenges, this is triggering for participants. So empowerment that we seek, it comes later. It comes now when they can see their stories represented in the exhibits, when they see people relating to them and caring for them. But at the beginning, when they tell the stories, it's hard. And so again, a lot of caring and a lot of relational work needs to be done. Another thing, why we wanted an in-person exhibit was that what PhotoVoice does, it actually creates this space for everyone to make up their own mind about what they see. The photograph is supposed to speak for itself. And as no one has any control, participants or researchers, we don't have any control of how others can interpret it. And given the anti-immigrant sentiment and given the individualistic tendencies, this can go in any different ways. And so we found that having roundtable discussions as part of the experience of the exhibit was very much useful for the audience to reflect on what they see and hear each other and each other experiences, and this way try and work on like bring this educative value, more of this educational value to the experience. Again, audience's agenda. Sometimes I'll hear, oh, you know what, bring these stories to us because we want to share it with our students who are immigrants, which is great. It's important. It is important to normalize the story, but it is very much important that service providers, politicians, policymakers work with those stories too, and they do not become hosted by immigrants only, that they start creating this space where each one of us stops accepting things that we cannot accept and start changing them. And this is not me, this is Angela Davis, but I find it very much powerful. So thank you for listening. Our emails are here in case you want to contact us. Quite easy, immigrantemployment@trentu.ca, or Marina Morgenstern at trentu.ca. I have access to both. So please do contact me, and I'll be very happy to continue this conversation.
Marvelous. Thank you so much, Marina, for a wonderful presentation and a very thoughtful discussion of the photo voice method and also how you've used it. It's really great to hear you drawing together also how Hajia's work relates to yours, and to hear about how you also would connect with what Marco has been doing. So thank you very much for a great presentation, and let's move now into the larger discussion. I would like to invite anyone of the participants to post your questions in the Q&A. I'd like also to start out with a question. And this is for both Marina and Hajia. Marco would be interested to hear from you as well, about how to value both of the approaches that Marina and Hajia were talking about. Marina was talking about a much more formalized government-funded approach with a specific grant and a specific mission and goals and a beginning and an end and a final product. While Hajia was talking a lot about ongoing work. And one of the things that came up in our last webinar, as well as in our needs assessment, is meshing the community approaches with the academic approaches, so everybody is working in the same direction, even if they're coming from very different places. So if you could talk a bit about that, how academic knowledge sharing and community knowledge sharing are similar, how they're different, and how they can be used potentially together.
Mm-hmm. So do you want me to start?
Yeah, if you would.
Okay. Just
And then
checking.
Hajia.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. In academia, well, Hajia, when you talked about it, you talked about this white coat kind of research. And definitely as an academic, I can relate to this. And I was raised, when I was a student, I was raised with the idea of research being part of the ivory tower, research done in the ivory tower, and universities being those holders of knowledge or holders of truths. But I should say that my academic development and professional development, and I've done a lot of community work too with immigrants and racialized communities, taught me about multiplicity of truth and how truth is relative to time, space, political culture, and how important it is for academics in general, social workers particularly, be aware of those multiple truths. We cannot work or build bridges with each other when each one holds for their truth, or when we come from the position of superiority and saying what we know is the right thing and you just need to listen to us. And so as a researcher, I identify as a feminist researcher, and a feminist researcher who cares about this relationality, who pays a lot of attention to ethics of care. And so for me, while I understand that as a researcher I hold power, I tend to, I aim to use this power for the betterment of people I work with. And in my work, this is where I call it, I step sideways, creating this space for the community to speak. But as I've said before, it requires a lot of work to create this kind of relationship. It is not enough to just say, well, I want this and I'm going to do this and this happens. Of course not. And so those community-based approaches, they require a lot of relational work and a lot of work on developing those partnerships, not only with community organizations, but also with communities themselves. And I think Khadija will talk about this much better than I can about how it is. And I should say that although we have kind of final products, the digital photo book or the exhibit, I do see it as work in progress. Like, I mean, as an academic, I never see my work as final, or it's always ongoing. And I do sincerely hope that this project and the knowledge mobilization efforts that we have will lead to collaborations that matter to community, that we can, where I can use my power as an academic and my access to grants to do this kind of work to amplify the community voice.
That's great. Thank you. Hajia. I think you're muted. There you go.
Yeah, so a month ago we were given some kind of we took some course called Evaluation Benchmark provided by YSM. So we went to, as a co-chair of safety, we went with my colleague Ines. So we were there learning how to go step by step and the names of all the steps that we. So we were okay. We did that, but we didn't put the name. You know, there is no name on the project, on the steps that we're going, but we went through all these steps that they were teaching us. So after they done teaching, we're talking, we explained to them, okay, now we can put the name on the steps that we did to complete that project. So I'm saying that because when we come up with project, the community come together, we do the group meeting, we get ideas. So now we're looking for funding. So when we don't even wait for the funding. We just start whatever we're doing. Like example again, Ines see that we have a senior buildings. So a lot of things we're doing, the seniors don't know, or they were left out. So what Ines start doing is she has a weekly like a tea party in the lobby where she will go door to door to post flyers or talk to the seniors so they can come down, and then she'll tell them what is needed to be done, or they tell her what they need more important to be needed to what they're not getting. And then Hajia, let's do this. She's on it. And then when the funding come, we put it through them. They want to, do you want to sponsor? This is what the seniors need. This is what this is what our seniors need. Would you do it? Sometimes they say yes, but you have to change the name, whatever. Yeah, we will change the name, but this is what we needed to be done. This is what it's not like we waited for them to give us the idea what we do. We have our own idea. We go by whether it's sponsored or not, we'll find a way. Like the community will find a way. Other people who get the funding might give us something out of their funding. Somebody will give us something, and then we'll put that together. And then then the next time when we put that that funding, and then they can approve it. So it's not it's just you know, the passion that you have inside to see things is happening in your community, to make sure that we will break the barrier no matter what. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that in your work, you use a very individualized approach, like
Yeah.
door to door, one-on-one. And Marco's approach is much more systemic and broad, like sharing information from his website. And Marina is also working individually, but also with a lot of sharing information in much more public spaces, like public libraries and
Yeah.
welcome centers and so forth. So I'm seeing very different approaches to sharing information here, but I think they're all necessary and they're all very complementary. They can work well together.
They do.
And one of the ideas of having webinars like this is to bring people together in the same space where we can talk about these different approaches, philosophies, perspectives, and learn from each other. And I'm definitely doing that today, and I'd really like to thank you all for your perspectives. Marco, do you have anything to add?
The only thing to add is there are good ideas out there about ensuring that the communities, or in this case, newcomers we're working with, are centered in the work and done in a community-driven way, even if academics are either leading or involved. So I'll just share my screen really quickly because I've got some on my site that I think are really important. So the Jane Finch community has created principles for conducting research in its community, and they did that together with York University. Right. In Hamilton, the Hamilton Immigration Partnership Council created some useful toolkits about if you're doing research with newcomers, how do you ensure it's meaningful and inclusive, which includes things like your rights for newcomers. You can say no, right? Things like that. And then the Center for Refugee Studies, along with Canadian Council for Refugees, created similar guidelines if you're doing research with people in situations of forced migration, so specifically with refugees or refugee claimants in this case. And they include things like, what are your rights in research in multiple languages? So we as community members, as well as people who might be more academically focused, can access and ensure that we're meeting these principles, that we're living these guidelines, and that they are part of the way we not just create research, but also mobilize the knowledge from it, right? It goes back to sort of what I alluded to in my presentation about, we have to understand if you're sharing for a lay audience, right? I'm not an academic researcher. I find it really difficult to go through some academic publications to tease out because the language is so inaccessible, right? And I'm a first, native language, English is my native language. So you layer on top of that the challenges that other people come up with, that if we are trying to share or include those communities, how you share and what you share and the ways we share it have to be inclusive as well. And so I think there's a lot that can be learned from those approaches for sure.
Yeah. And Marco, this touches on something that you raised during your presentation. Your work is very focused. You know exactly who your audience is, what the goals of your work is. My audience is service providers. My goal is to share information with them. And Hajia, your audience is your community, and your goal is to help everybody take care of each other. And Marina, your audience would be more policymakers and service providers again, and also academics, but also the community to learn about their own needs and their commonalities with what experiences they're sharing and how they can work together to overcome barriers. Yeah. Okay, I see one question in the Q&A, and one person has a raised hand. You can use the question and answer function to submit your questions. This one is for Marco. This is from Chris and Kong. Our team is embarking on a website to house content for a project that we're working on. What would you suggest is a sustainable way to do this, considering your presentation, the idea that many websites have limited lifespans? Are there more sustainable website platforms that you'd recommend? Should this digital resource be built within the current agency's website to make sure it continues long-term? What's the best approach?
It's a great question. And so there's a couple of things, and just off the top of my head, one is yes. I would build this within your current agency's website because you're more likely to maintain that than some separate website. It hurt my head recently when I saw someone create a new website with a new domain for a project that is part of the work that they do, because that domain is paid for a certain period of time. And you have to keep paying for that to exist. Whereas their home website is something they are not going to let go down unless the organization fails, right? So project websites are created, but I call them vanity websites in a sense, because you're creating something that has a unique website address that if you aren't around, someone's going to wonder, why are we paying $10, $15, $20 a year for this or extra hosting, right? So you can create subdomains on your website. So like what I did with those two sites that I have, immigrantchildren.km4s.ca, eskills.km4s.ca. You can create a completely unique looking website actually on that, even as km4s.ca/something. You can create unique looking websites that don't have to follow the look and feel of your own website right on your own domain. That ensures that it's part of your existing website strategy, which means it has to be maintained in some meaningful way, right? So that's what happened with eSkills, for example. The project ended, they stopped paying for the domain, the site went down, and it was no longer accessible. So the other thing is so that's the first consideration that helps it become more sustainable. And even if you're not maintaining it 6 years from now, it'll still actually exist as a repository, right? It'll still be there for people to access. The other thing is to share on these multiple platforms. So share what you're working on, project summaries, infographics, project reports, works in progress on the various communities of practice, right? The idea is to create once and share prolifically so that it exists in a number of different spaces, and not just the link back to your site, but even uploading a PDF into SettleNet or the various communities of practice will give that some life, will create conversations in those spaces. So yes, I think that those are the main considerations. Sustainably is if you incorporate it into your own site, it'll actually have a life beyond the project itself or some unique website domain. The other thing is you can create a website domain and not create a whole site around it and just redirect that domain to your website, so that ultimately, even if the domain fails, the website still exists on your main organization website. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that will be quite helpful. Thank you. This is something that happened with the CERIS, the Center of Excellence for Research and Immigration and Settlement. We have all of those files, but it's a matter of getting them hosted. Yeah.
And I'm happy to help you because I've got them too. So
we have, there is a stipulation that they have to be hosted at a university. So we're working on that. Yeah. So thank you. This was that was a very helpful answer. We've had a request to share your links. Marco will be sending those to me, and I will post them on the Community Knowledge website, the Community Knowledge Program website, which is on the main Wellesley site.
Yeah, but just to let Margaret know, if she goes to km4s.ca, the post is there at the top of the page already, and so she can go through those links. That's why I shared it that way. So it's a link already on the site, so you should be able to access it today.
km4s.ca on the website. Marvelous. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Anything that we have touched on that you would like to dig into deeper? Hajia, I would love to hear more about the IWIP, the Immigrant Women Integration Program, as I mentioned before, and how I know that they do training for community-based participatory action research.
Yeah.
And I know that at least one cohort that has gone through the program has done an independent research study and shared the results with the community. So if you could talk about that program and that process a bit, that would be very helpful.
So IWIP, Immigrant Women Integration Program, is just what it sounds like. It's it used to be program that was only for Regent Park area, but because of the pandemic, it widened. Like other people in other community, which make it even more great, can apply IWIP program. So the focus of IWIP is to break the barrier for immigrant women, because sometimes they come to Canada and they're all alone. So in our program, they meet other women who are facing similar challenges with them. And by the time they finish the IWIP program, they become one. They become like a friends, because you have to do the research in group, and you change the group because so you can be able to have a kind of relationship with all the people in the IWIP. And at the end, they also provide you with the mentors, somebody who can, like somebody who you can contact to, beside though they still have the center for very, I think for maybe after that, for another year, the center will be contacting them to make sure that what they are in life and what's happening, what things in their life. And then also the mentors are there for them. I think that's for 6 months to a year too. And by the time they finish, some of them find jobs, and some of them even find a job in the Center for Learning and Development. And so it's just like a threshold that open up with other opportunity in the community.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like a wonderful program. And there is one of the things that Wellesley Institute has identified is that there is a real need among community agencies to learn about the basics of research, what it is, how it's done systematically, what kind of terms they'll need to know to interact with academics. And I know that the IWIP program has been doing that.
Yeah.
And that's something that Wellesley Institute has been working on as well. We've made a course about research basics for settlement workers.
Yeah.
Information about that is available on our website. Okay, thank you for that, Ajia.
Yeah.
Another quick question for Marco. How can we ensure that the evidence snapshots that we produce for service providers are relevant and impactful to the work that they're doing?
It's a great question. And I think I use evidence snapshots as one example. I think understanding who you're trying to reach is essential, right? So figuring out through the process of what you're creating, who you're sharing it with and what the right way to share it with them is, as well as language, tone, formats, all of those kinds of things. So there's a really good website called kmbtoolkit.ca, which I'm putting in that specific answer, but for others as well. And it's created by the Knowledge Institute on Child and Youth Mental Health and Addictions. And what it is a knowledge mobilization toolkit that will walk you through a lot of these different steps if you haven't gone through it before, to figure out what is it that you're trying to do, who is it you're trying to involve in the research itself, but also who are you sharing it with in this case, really importantly, and what's the right way to reach them. So is it a text-based snapshot? Is it a webinar? Is it a roundtable? Is it some training? Is it at a conference? Is it an infographic? Is it all of those things? Is it multiple ways? Is it a research summary that's longer than a research snapshot that indicates very specifically for frontline service providers, this is what we extracted that's useful for you, written in language that's accessible for them, which would be a very different thing than a policy brief that you might write from the research for government policymakers or things like that, or that you would put into an academic journal. So the research snapshot for me is useful because it's a one way to create kind of a teaser that leads them through to read the full report. But if that full report remains slightly inaccessible in its language and focus in some ways, you can lead them through to an interim report, if you will. So I like to say, for example, my podcasts, if I had the time, right? These are 45-minute conversations I have with people. If I could extract 15 pieces of content if I had the time to do it, and make those relevant for different audiences. So here are the top 5 tips in an infographic. Here's something that this person said that's relevant for a frontline worker. Here's something this person said that's they're advocating to policymakers, and created a short brief. All of that's predicated on me understanding who I'm trying to reach and what I'm trying to get them to do. So some of it's call to action, some of it's just a knowledge understanding. A lot of knowledge mobilization is this notion of moving research to impact. So what would be useful for that frontline worker, for those service providers, to take what you've created and help move that to some sort of actual next step, a knowledge, an impact. How can they incorporate this into their practice? And so for you to be able to do that, you have to understand them, so that the recommendations are true to how they're doing their work. In the same way that if you're planning to bring the community together to talk about your results, you know, and we learn this in the nonprofit sector, you got to have some food, you got to have a comfortable room, you got to be welcoming, you got to make it an event that isn't just about the information, but is also about the inclusion and sort of the, for lack of a better word, the ceremony of creating these connections together. So it's all about that step of understanding who you're trying to reach and what you want them to do with the information. And that, I think, will help make it relevant in terms of impact.
I think that's a great answer. Thank you. It is really, this is a theme that I'm hearing throughout all of the presentations, is that you need to understand your audience. Who are you trying to share the information with? And how are they going to understand it? How can you package it so that the people that you're trying to reach will be able to hear you? The other day, I was an English major at university, and I was looking at some literary theory that's come up in the past couple of years. I've heard about something called new materialism, and I looked it up, and I was trying to read these academic articles about it, and I just couldn't. Every other word was just so dense, and it was taking me like 10 minutes to get through a sentence. I'm a native speaker of English. I have a graduate degree. I have been working with the language for 30 years, and it was still impenetrable. It was still just too much to understand. And I've seen a lot of this kind of thing happen in social sciences as well. Academics often write for other academics, and they have different priorities about why they're doing the research. Many academics want to advance in their careers. Many academics are involved because they want to help, because they want to support marginalized communities, because they want to lift their own communities up. But there's still a lot of different funding structures, different priorities, different audiences. And I'm very pleased to hear everybody talking today about how you have defined your audiences and how you think about them, and how you have really tailored the information that you share to be the most effective as it can be. And I hope those who are watching the webinar today are coming away with some ideas and some of Marco's absolutely tremendous resources about knowledge mobilization, sharing knowledge, repositories of information. There is so much out there. And Marco has raised a really important point that there needs to be time to go through it all and to draw out information, to get to the policymakers, to get to the communities, to get to the service providers, to improve the lives of the people who are new to Canada and making it their home.
If I could just add one thing to that, the principles for conducting research in the Jane Finch community add some things that an academic might not necessarily think about, and they add things that communities don't necessarily think about. For example, there is it's got to go through research approval at the academic institution. Well, in Jane Finch, they also wanted to go through a community review, right? And both of those are great learning opportunities for both sides. So the community understands the ethics behind how this research is being done within the institution, and the researchers understand the ethics and concerns that are held in the community, and making sure that they're aligned together. And I think that's really a useful thing to think about as you're conducting the research, not just sharing it, is how are we bringing community into the planning phases? so that they're part of what we do. Because if you do that right, then you've already centered your audiences, and how to disseminate it becomes completely obvious because they'll tell you, right? So I think those kinds of principles are really applicable outside of Jane Finch, because they are all about community involvement and research to impact, and as we're describing.
Yeah, those principles are unique to that community, but they're also very applicable in many other situations. It's similar to the OCAP principles from some indigenous researchers that they've developed, the ownership, control, access, and production, I think. Who is in control of the knowledge? Who maintains it? Who owns it? Who has access to it? Who has access to, as Hajia pointed out, sometimes the data is very sensitive. Sometimes it's really painful. So who controls the stories and who gets to tell them? And I think some of the approaches that we've heard about today have been very positive in that they've really worked on empowering the people with the lived experiences, with the stories, to get their own voices out there and to be heard. And that's like part of the work that Marina has done as well. Seeing the participants' own perspectives through their lens. Yeah. All right, does anyone have a final point or a comment or any final questions before we bring this to this really fascinating session to a close? Okay, thank you all so much for your participation and your time. It's very, very much appreciated. We'd like to thank everyone who's joined us today. This is the final webinar of the 2022-2023 series. We will have another 3 webinar series coming up in the next fiscal year. If you haven't already, please join the Community Knowledge Program mailing list. We will be sending out invitations to the webinar, the future webinars, and we will be establishing our own community of practice to talk about research and knowledge mobilization, particularly in the newcomer serving sector in the Greater Toronto area, because that's our mandate. So a lot of links have been shared today, and we will be posting those on the website. Ours is www.wellesleyinstitute.com/community-knowledge-program. And that's just been posted in the chat. So thank you again. And it's been a real pleasure and a fascinating discussion. And I very, very much appreciate your contributions and also the support of Colleen McDonald here at the Wellesley Institute, who has been running the event very smoothly. And we appreciate your work. Thanks again. And this concludes today's session.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.